Have you ever noticed how some people move through life as if they carry a quiet radar, always active, always picking up nuances, connections, and details that almost everyone else overlooks? And strangely enough, they don't see anything special about it, as if this ability were just an ordinary part of their day. There is something fascinating about this kind of behavior, because while many individuals try hard to appear knowledgeable, articulate, or impressive, others reveal extraordinary intelligence precisely by not caring about appearances at all. They simply behave naturally, and this natural behavior ends up exposing far more than they imagine. The ironic part is that these people often have no idea they possess such rare qualities. They go about living, talking, observing, and thinking in spontaneous ways, unaware that their ordinary habits work as unmistakable signs of a remarkably sharp mind. This irony becomes even more striking when you assume that highly intelligent people must be surrounded by expensive books, grand theories, or overly complex speeches. Yet, in real life, the opposite is usually true. The brightest minds tend to choose clarity, simplicity, authenticity, and genuine curiosity over theatrics. It is as if an invisible elegance accompanies everything they do, a discreet, unforced elegance that is impossible to ignore once you pay attention. What makes this even more curious is that exceptionally intelligent individuals rarely introduce themselves as such. In fact, they run from labels like these because they understand that intelligence is not a trophy you wave at others. When we think of someone like Richard Feynman, this pattern becomes crystal clear. He never tried to look like a genius, even though he was one of the most influential physicists of the modern era. His extraordinary mind functioned with the enthusiasm of a curious child, full of humor, wonder, and excitement for even the simplest things. He often said that the joy of understanding something was what fueled his entire life, not applause, not accolades, not academic prestige. This seemingly innocent outlook hid an enormous depth of thought. While many were busy polishing an intellectual image, Feynman was fully committed to genuine understanding. His attitude inspired much of the insight guiding this video, because what makes highly intelligent people truly unique is not what they consciously try to express, but what naturally emerges from the way their mind works. You've probably noticed at some point individuals who ask unexpected questions that make others uncomfortable, as if they were reaching too far, or individuals who prefer to stay quiet in environments filled with egos fighting for attention, or those who laugh at things nobody else found funny because they noticed a detail others completely missed. These behaviors aren't accidental. They reveal mental structures operating beyond ordinary expectations. What's fascinating is that the people who display these traits usually do so without any intention of showing off. These patterns arise effortlessly, forming an inseparable part of who they are. And this absence of effort makes everything even more intriguing. In this video, we'll explore subtle attitudes, silent signals, and involuntary habits that characterize exceptionally intelligent individuals. We'll uncover behaviors that even the people demonstrating them rarely notice. No dramatization, no glorification, just a clear, captivating look at real patterns. You might recognize someone close to you. You might recognize something about yourself. You might even discover that you possess more signs of intelligence than you ever realized, even if you never thought about it this way. Get ready to look at everyday behavior from a new angle. Get ready to compare ordinary actions with uncommon traits. Get ready to understand small details that most people overlook. Get ready to uncover how extraordinary minds stand out even when they have no awareness of it. And by the end, you might notice that many of these traits were already present in your own life. CTA for Section 1. If any part of this introduction reminded you of someone, or yourself, drop a comment saying, "I'm ready to learn more." There is something captivating about the way exceptionally intelligent individuals interact with ideas that most people accept without a second thought. While the majority simply nod along to whatever sounds reasonable or familiar, these individuals experience an almost automatic urge to challenge, probe, and dismantle assumptions that everyone else treats as settled. It is not a performance, not an act of rebellion, not a desire to irritate anyone. It is an internal impulse shaped by a mind that refuses to stay on the surface. For them, every explanation, no matter how widely accepted, invites curiosity, and every rule, no matter how traditional, deserves examination. They do not go out looking for contradictions. Contradictions tend to find them because their attention gravitates instinctively toward holes no one else noticed. This tendency often begins in childhood, long before anyone attaches labels like smart, gifted, or analytical. A teacher might present a fact with absolute confidence, expecting the class to memorize it quietly. Meanwhile, one student raises a hand, not to challenge authority, but because something doesn't fit together in their mind. They sense a missing link. They detect an inconsistency. They want to understand the mechanism behind the statement, not just the statement itself. And while this can frustrate adults who prefer predictable lessons, what is really happening is a kind of mental alignment. Their mind refuses to accept answers that feel incomplete. As these individuals grow older, this inner mechanism becomes stronger and more refined. They start noticing patterns hidden behind ordinary situations. They ask questions that appear simple but often reveal flaws in entire systems. They develop an ear for explanations that sound impressive yet mean nothing. The fascinating part is that they are not trying to expose anyone. Their attention simply gravitates toward clarity, and anything that lacks clarity triggers that familiar internal nudge. Something here doesn't add up. This instinct mirrors something deeply present in the philosophy of Richard Feynman, who famously prioritized genuine understanding over polished presentations. He believed that an idea should be clear enough for a child to grasp, not because children needed the explanation, but because clarity forces honesty. When he encountered a concept wrapped in complicated language, he became suspicious, not because he distrusted people, but because confusion is often a disguise for incomplete thinking. And so, he kept asking questions, not to seem clever, not to win arguments, but to reach the core of things. That attitude defines many highly intelligent individuals even today, whether or not they are aware of the similarity. What makes this behavior so unique is its subtlety. To an outside observer, the questions might appear harmless, straightforward, sometimes even naive. But beneath those questions exists a sharp intuition, capable of detecting structural weaknesses in explanations that everyone else assumed were solid. And the moment these individuals start probing, conversations shift, vague ideas unravel, superficial arguments lose strength, and complexities that everyone ignored rise to the surface. This doesn't happen because they want to dominate the discussion. It happens because they cannot help pursuing coherence. Another remarkable aspect is how uncomfortable this tendency can make certain people, not because the questions are aggressive, but because they reveal gaps others would prefer to ignore. Picture a workplace meeting where a new strategy is presented with flashy slides and confident language. Most attendees listen passively, nodding along. Then someone quietly asks a simple question, one that looks innocent but exposes a fundamental flaw. Suddenly, the room changes. The presenter hesitates. The plan wobbles. And everyone realizes that the only person who saw the issue was the one who couldn't accept the obvious at face value. Individuals with this trait are not driven by ego. In many cases, they don't even realize how different their thinking is. To them, questioning is as natural as breathing. They are not trying to be difficult. They are trying to understand. And their curiosity is not selective. It applies to science, relationships, everyday decisions, household problems, bureaucratic rules, anything that reaches their attention. This constant pursuit of clarity is not exhausting for them. It is energizing. Discovering how something works brings them satisfaction. Uncovering contradictions brings relief. Arriving at a coherent explanation feels like closing a loop in their mind. The deeper truth is that their intelligence is not defined by how much they know, but by their refusal to settle for incomplete answers. While many people search for closure, they search for truth. While others want comfort, they want precision. While most accept simplicity, they chase understanding. And even if they never announce it, this trait quietly shapes everything they do. If you're the type who always asks, "Why?" drop a comment saying, "I need real answers." One of the most revealing traits of exceptionally intelligent people is the way they handle mistakes. While most individuals try to hide their errors, justify them, or shift blame to preserve a sense of competence, highly intelligent minds relate to mistakes in a completely different way. For them, being wrong is not a blow to their identity, it is a doorway. They see errors as raw material, something to sculpt, examine, and repurpose. What others view as embarrassment, they view as information. And because they don't cling to the illusion of certainty, they learn faster, adapt quicker, and understand more deeply than people who fear looking imperfect. This difference becomes striking in everyday contexts. Picture a conversation where someone confidently states a fact that later turns out to be incorrect. Most individuals react by doubling down, defending their claim, or distracting from the mistake. Meanwhile, someone with a sharper intellect simply says, "I was wrong," without tension, hesitation, or shame. The natural ease in admitting an error often surprises people because society is built around the idea that being wrong equals incompetence. But in the mind of a highly intelligent person, mistakes do not diminish them. Refusing to learn does. This mindset has roots in something central to Richard Feynman's worldview. He openly embraced the idea that uncertainty is not a weakness, but a fundamental part of understanding the universe. He found it more honest, and far more productive, to say, "I don't know," than to pretend otherwise. This attitude allowed him to remain intellectually agile, and it prevented his ego from blocking his ability to learn. He understood that nature does not care about human pride. Reality remains what it is, regardless of how confident someone feels. So, for him, acknowledging ignorance was not a humiliation, it was the beginning of insight. This attitude is mirrored in many bright individuals today. They treat mistakes like data points. When something goes wrong, they analyze what happened rather than panic about how it looks. They are more interested in accuracy than image, more invested in growth than validation. Because of this, they often progress at a remarkable pace, even if they don't recognize how unusual their behavior is. To them, self-correction is natural. They instinctively adjust their approach as new information appears, and their flexibility gives them an enormous advantage in problem solving. There is also a profound emotional component to the way they handle mistakes. Instead of experiencing shame or defensiveness, they feel curiosity. Instead of fearing failure, they fear stagnation. When others worry about losing credibility, they worry about losing opportunities to refine their thinking. This emotional freedom is rare, and it silently sets them apart. Their willingness to revise their perspective often makes conversations with them refreshing. There is no exhausting back and forth powered by ego, no desperate insistence on being right. They show a kind of intellectual maturity that encourages others to relax and think more clearly as well. Ironically, their comfort with mistakes sometimes gets misunderstood. People may interpret their openness as indifference, lack of confidence, or even weakness. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Only someone certain of their abilities can admit a mistake without fear. Only someone secure in their identity can allow themselves to be corrected. Only someone truly interested in understanding something will prioritize truth over approval. Their humility is not a lack of intelligence. It is one of its clearest signs. This trait also reveals itself in how they learn new skills. When attempting something unfamiliar, they do not expect perfection, nor do they fear incompetence. They move quickly from failure to refinement, studying each misstep like a scientist examines experimental results. Their improvement tends to be rapid because they do not emotionally resist the learning curve. They treat the process like a puzzle, not a performance. And while others get discouraged by imperfection, they use it as fuel. Each mistake makes them sharper, not smaller. Even socially, this behavior stands out. If they misinterpret a comment, forget a detail, or judge a situation incorrectly, they fix it calmly. They apologize when needed, adjust their perspective, and move forward. There is no dramatic tension, no need for excuses. This ease creates an atmosphere of trust around them. People feel safe admitting their own mistakes because they see that mistakes are not treated as character flaws, but as natural occurrences. The most remarkable part is that they rarely notice how unusual this attitude is. For them, intellect and humility are partners, not opposites. They don't see mistakes as personal failures. They see them as steps in a long chain of discovery. And this quiet, unpretentious relationship with being wrong is one of the clearest indicators of a mind operating on a different level. If you believe mistakes are lessons, comment. Growth starts here. One of the most overlooked traits of exceptionally intelligent people is their ability to observe quietly. While others rush to speak, react, or impose opinions, they stay attentive, absorbing details that everyone else filters out. This is not shyness, insecurity, or passivity. It is deliberate awareness. Their mind instinctively analyzes tone, timing, motivation, inconsistencies, micro-expressions, and the unspoken dynamics shaping every interaction. Anyone watching from the outside might think they are simply listening. In reality, they are decoding. This silent observation becomes obvious in group settings. Picture a meeting where multiple people talk over one another, each fighting to appear competent. Meanwhile, the most intelligent person in the room listens without interruption, noting every assumption, gap, contradiction, and emotional undertone. They speak only when they have something meaningful to add, and when they do, the entire conversation shifts. Their contribution is concise and precise, as if they quietly mapped the entire situation while everyone else tangled themselves in noise. It's not that they aim to dominate the discussion. Clarity simply flows through them because they took the time to understand what others ignored. This kind of awareness does not develop from a desire to look impressive. It stems from curiosity and from a mind naturally inclined to connect fragments others fail to notice. They pick up patterns in behavior, detect inconsistencies in stories, recognize tension in someone's voice, sense discomfort behind a smile. They watch how people respond when they feel challenged, how they act when they want approval, how they behave when they're uncertain. While others focus on the surface, these individuals instinctively scan deeper layers, looking for coherence, intention, and truth. This way of perceiving the world resonates deeply with the attitude of Richard Feynman, who never accepted explanations at face value. He observed everything, not only concepts in physics, but people, systems, interactions, and human tendencies. He once said that the easiest person to fool is yourself, which is why observation must be honest. Real intelligence requires noticing what you want to ignore, and this principle shapes how many highly intelligent individuals move through the world. They see more because they look without filters. Another fascinating aspect of their observational style is how it influences their sense of timing. They don't rush responses because they understand that reacting too quickly can distort understanding. Instead, they take a moment to process each piece of information, allowing the bigger picture to form. This creates an impression of calmness, but it is actually precision. They know that clarity emerges from patience, not haste. When they finally express an idea, it carries weight, not because they sound authoritative, but because they have distilled the situation into its essential form. This ability also extends into their personal relationships. They notice small changes in someone's tone, energy, or behavior long before others do. They can tell when someone is hiding sadness, frustration, or hesitation. They sense discomfort in a conversation, even when words don't reveal it. And because of this awareness, they often provide surprisingly accurate advice, ask questions that get straight to the point, or offer comfort before anyone speaks about their feelings. They appear intuitive, but their intuition is actually enhanced perception. However, this trait can create some challenges. Because they observe so deeply, they often detect dishonesty, manipulation, or contradictions long before others realize what is happening. This can make social environments feel exhausting at times, especially when surrounded by people who prioritize performance over authenticity. Their mind catches inconsistencies instantly, and their internal alarm goes off even when everyone else remains unaware. They do not always confront the problem directly. Sometimes they simply distance themselves quietly, protecting their energy. The interesting part is that most of them do not consider this observational ability exceptional. They assume everyone perceives nuances the same way. They don't realize that their awareness operates at a different resolution, like a lens that captures layers others never see. They think they're just paying attention, when in reality, they're reading emotional and logical patterns simultaneously, something that most people cannot do with the same level of depth. This quiet observational habit is one of the clearest signs of a highly intelligent mind, a mind that listens before speaking, analyzes before reacting, and understands before concluding. It is subtle, but powerful, and it shapes every decision they make. If you're a silent observer, comment, "I see more than I say." People often imagine intelligence as something loud, flamboyant, or immediately visible. They associate being smart with quick answers, complex vocabulary, or flashy demonstrations of knowledge. However, One of the most telling indicators of genuine mental sharpness operates far more quietly. The subtle tendency to connect scattered elements and notice structures that others overlook entirely. This ability, which emerges almost effortlessly for certain individuals, shapes the way they interpret daily life, solve problems, and even navigate relationships. What makes this trait fascinating is its subtlety. Many who possess it don't think of themselves as particularly gifted, because to them, these connections feel obvious. Someone remarks casually about a minor change in a routine, and they instantly infer three possible reasons behind it. A technical issue appears, and they naturally trace it back through several layers of cause and effect without even realizing they're performing a kind of mental calculus. Instead of perceiving each event as isolated, their mind arranges everything into a framework where sequences align, results make sense, and inconsistencies become instantly noticeable. This knack for pattern recognition is not about memorizing details. It's about detecting the underlying rhythm behind those details, and the rhythm reveals itself only to those who pay attention in a specific, almost instinctive way. They wonder why a small anomaly appeared in a familiar system. They question why someone phrased a sentence differently today than yesterday. They observe slight variations in behavior, tone, or structure, and treat them not as noise, but as clues. Without actively trying, they extract meaning from the parts that others dismiss. One striking consequence of this mental habit is the ability to forecast outcomes with surprising accuracy. When someone can see the shape of a pattern while it is still forming, they can anticipate the next stage before it arrives. This isn't mystical intuition. It's the mind projecting a trend forward, much like a physicist extends the line of a graph to see where it might lead. Because they understand the internal logic behind a situation, they often know its direction long before others do. Another aspect worth noting is how this trait influences problem solving. Instead of attacking a challenge head-on, they step back and observe its architecture. They aren't satisfied with quick fixes. They want to understand the mechanism producing the issue. When a machine falters, they don't merely replace the faulty part. They trace the chain of interactions to identify the underlying weakness. When a dispute emerges, they quietly track the history of behaviors, motivations, and misunderstandings that fed it. Their solutions tend to be stable because they address roots rather than branches. This orientation also brings a unique kind of sensitivity. People with this mental pattern are often the first to detect unspoken tensions or emerging conflicts. Tiny shifts in atmosphere register immediately. They sense when someone is withholding information, not through suspicion but through the subtle mismatch between expression and intention. While this ability can feel burdensome at times, it also enables them to make decisions with greater clarity and empathy. What makes this trait even more intriguing is its relationship with curiosity. Pattern-seeking minds rarely settle for surface explanations. They pick at threads, examine causes, and follow ideas until they uncover something fundamental. This persistent drive to understand, even in mundane contexts, amplifies their cognitive strength. The more they explore, the more structures they discover. The more structures they discover, the more effectively they think. Interestingly, many who possess this ability underestimate it. They assume everyone sees the same connections because, to them, the process is immediate and natural. Yet this very ease is what sets them apart. The skill doesn't emerge from effort. It emerges from an inherent orientation toward depth, coherence, and structure. In essence, genuine intelligence often hides within this quiet habit of recognizing order where others see randomness. It is not flashy. It is not loud. It does not demand attention. But it governs the way these individuals interpret the world, make decisions, and discover truths that would remain invisible without their unique way of seeing. A curious paradox appears when you observe individuals who process information with remarkable clarity. The sharper their reasoning becomes, the less rigid their convictions tend to be. This doesn't mean they lack confidence or avoid commitment. Rather, they maintain a quiet awareness that every belief carries limits, blind spots, and assumptions that deserve continuous examination. While many equate intelligence with having all the answers, the most perceptive minds recognize the vast space of what they don't know, and this recognition shapes their behavior more profoundly than any single piece of knowledge they possess. At first glance, this might seem counterintuitive. People with strong analytical skills often excel in their fields, solve complex challenges, and make accurate predictions. Yet instead of clinging to their conclusions, they frequently revisit them, testing whether new evidence reshapes the landscape of understanding. Their uncertainty is not insecurity, it is discipline. It is a deliberate refusal to treat early insights as final verdicts. One of the reasons behind this habit is the awareness of how fragile assumptions can be. They know how easily a seemingly reliable pattern can be disrupted by one overlooked variable. They understand that data, no matter how detailed, always represents only part of the picture. They have learned through experience that many errors arise not from a lack of intelligence, but from excessive confidence in one's first interpretation. So instead of defending their thinking, they interrogate it. This internal questioning does not take the form of dramatic self-doubt. Rather, it appears as a calm process of revision. They ask themselves whether their reasoning still holds up under new information. They consider alternative explanations, even those that initially seem unappealing or improbable. They check whether their emotional reactions might be distorting their judgment. This quiet internal dialogue becomes a protective mechanism against the traps that overconfidence sets. Another interesting aspect of this mindset is the freedom it provides. When someone is not attached to being right, they become far more open to learning. Conversations cease to be competitions, they become opportunities. Instead of defending their position in a discussion, they explore it. Instead of dismissing unfamiliar viewpoints, they examine them with genuine interest. This openness does not weaken their intelligence. It strengthens it, because it expands the range of ideas they are willing to consider. Ironically, this constant re-evaluation of beliefs often leads others to misinterpret them. Their willingness to revise conclusions can be seen as indecision. Their habit of questioning assumptions is sometimes mistaken for uncertainty. Yet beneath that apparent softness lies a firm foundation. The commitment to truth above ego, discovery above appearance, and accuracy above pride. They understand that being wrong occasionally is far less dangerous than refusing to re-examine flawed ideas. This trait also shapes the way they approach long-term goals. Instead of following a rigid plan, they adjust their trajectory as circumstances evolve. They treat progress as an iterative process, similar to refining a complex experiment. Each step provides new data, and each piece of data may require them to adjust their direction. Because of this flexible approach, they adapt faster and recover from setbacks more efficiently than those who insist on sticking to outdated assumptions. What makes this characteristic particularly powerful is its influence on creativity. When someone is willing to question their own conclusions, they naturally open space for unconventional ideas. They feel no need to force the world to fit their existing models. Instead, they build new models when necessary. Many innovative solutions emerge from this ability to let go of a comfortable answer and look again. Some of the greatest scientific breakthroughs, artistic innovations, and technological advances have been born from the simple act of admitting there might be a better way. Ultimately, this quiet humility becomes one of the clearest signs of deep intelligence. Not the kind displayed in competitions or debates, but the kind that endures, evolves, and expands. It is a mindset that treats knowledge as a living process rather than a fixed destination. It is a discipline that keeps the mind sharp, the reasoning honest, and the curiosity alive. There is one final behavior that subtly distinguishes exceptionally sharp thinkers from everyone else, and it often goes unnoticed because it operates quietly beneath their outward actions. They maintain a constant internal separation between observation and interpretation. While most people instantly merge what they notice with what they believe it means, those with unusually strong cognitive clarity pause, sometimes for only a fraction of a second, before deciding what a particular situation represents. This simple mental gap, invisible from the outside, fundamentally transforms the way they respond to the world. To understand why this trait is so powerful, consider how quickly humans tend to form conclusions. A tone of voice is interpreted as irritation. A delayed message is interpreted as disinterest. A small setback is interpreted as a prediction of failure. These fast interpretations are convenient, but they are rarely accurate. People with stronger mental discipline recognize this, and because they recognize it, they avoid falling into the trap of reacting to assumptions rather than facts. Instead of letting the mind rush ahead, they examine the raw information first. They look at what is actually in front of them: the behavior, the data, the pattern, the outcome. Only after establishing what is solid and verifiable do they move to the second step, building meaning around it. This mental distinction prevents them from confusing perception with projection, and it allows them to navigate life with far more precision and emotional stability. This separation also influences how they communicate. Rather than accusing someone based on an assumption, they clarify. Rather than escalating a conflict through misinterpretation, they seek the underlying cause. Rather than reacting impulsively, they respond intentionally. People often describe them as calm or grounded, but their composure does not come naturally. It is the result of an internal habit built through experience, reflection, and a willingness to question their own reactions. Another fascinating aspect of this trait is how deeply it supports long-term intelligence. When someone consistently separates observation from interpretation, they automatically reduce cognitive distortion. Their reasoning becomes cleaner because it is not built on emotional shortcuts or mistaken conclusions. Over time, this disciplined clarity compounds. Every assumption that doesn't get challenged becomes an obstacle to accurate thinking, but every assumption that is challenged opens space for deeper understanding. This is why people with this habit often appear wiser than their age or background would suggest. This internal gap also fuels their self-awareness. Because they do not automatically assume that their first emotional reaction reflects reality, they are far more capable of analyzing why they feel what they feel. A sense of irritation becomes a clue to examine, not a signal to act on immediately. A burst of enthusiasm becomes a motivation to evaluate, not a guarantee that something is a good idea. Through this process, they gradually develop a reliable understanding of their strengths, limits, triggers, and patterns. This self-knowledge enhances decision-making because they can distinguish between choices shaped by genuine insight and choices driven by momentary impulses. Interestingly, this habit plays a major role in their ability to remain creative. Because they do not treat their initial interpretation as definitive, they leave room for alternative possibilities. This openness allows them to discover connections others overlook. A problem becomes an invitation rather than an obstacle. A strange result becomes a source of curiosity instead of frustration. This mindset is particularly evident in scientific thinkers like Richard Feynman, who constantly emphasize the importance of looking directly at nature rather than clinging to preconceived ideas. The world reveals far more to those who observe without forcing it to fit existing frameworks. Yet perhaps the most powerful effect of this habit is emotional freedom. When someone realizes that their interpretations are not absolute truths, they stop being controlled by them. A misunderstanding becomes only that, a misunderstanding, not a catastrophe. A moment of doubt becomes a simple signal, not a verdict. This mental distance provides resilience, adaptability, and stability in situations where others feel overwhelmed. It is a quiet advantage that shapes everything from relationships to career choices. In the end, this unseen practice, holding a small internal space between what they perceive and what they conclude, becomes one of the clearest indicators of refined intelligence. It sharpens logic, strengthens emotional balance, protects against cognitive traps, and opens space for continuous growth. It is subtle, almost invisible, yet profoundly transformative.